From the NewsChannel 5 network, this is Inside Politics.
Hello, everyone. I'm NewsChannel 5's political analyst, Pat Nolan. Welcome to Inside Politics. As President Joe Biden marched 6 months in the White House, his administration faces more pivotal weeks coming in Congress, with both houses negotiating different kinds of infrastructure bills that total over $4.7 trillion. Where does the president stand with his legislative agenda? Can Congress, especially the Democrats, be united enough to pass any significant legislation or to limit or abolish the filibuster in the Senate? With new political infighting breaking out on the Hill, what will be the outcome of the new House Select Committee to probe the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol? And will politics and positioning by both parties for the midterm elections coming up in 2022 end any chance of our lawmakers ever coming together? Nobody knows the Congress better than Vanderbilt political science emeritus professor Dr. Bruce Oppenheimer. He's our guest on Inside Politics this week. Dr. Oppenheimer, welcome back to the program.
Good to see you, Pat.
There were weeks of negotiations with Senate Republicans. Democratic Majority Leader Chuck Schumer set a Wednesday vote to see if there were 60 votes that are needed in the Senate to move forward on a bipartisan bill. The vote failed. In fact, no Republicans voted for it. Is the bipartisan effort to get an infrastructure bill dead?
The short answer is no. I think the Schumer effort was the way to hold the feet to the fire of the Republicans in the negotiating. And all reports now are that they're likely to reach something by early next week. Now, whether that holds true or not, I think we have to wait and see.
The Biden White House says they're optimistic. Should they be?
I think they should be, because they hold a card at the end of this game that is really important, which is if they can't get the 10 Republicans who agreed to move ahead with, reached a broad agreement on the infrastructure, to go along and vote to start debate on it, then their alternative is to roll that into reconciliation. And then the bill will be less like the Republicans would want. They will lose all their negotiating positions.
What changes will come in this bipartisan bill that will get the Republicans or keep them on board? And when those changes are made, what will that do to keep the Democrats united? Because they have to be united to pass bills in either house.
I think they agreed on the general outlines for this first bill. So that isn't the problem. The problem is writing the details of the bill. And so we've seen some things go by the wayside. So there will not be in it the money to beef up IRS enforcement capabilities. We know some things will go in and out of this bill, but I think it's working on the details. And they're not really being public about that. There aren't people coming out. What is important about these negotiations is there aren't people coming out criticizing parts of the negotiation or saying, this is a line of the sand, I'm not willing to negotiate over this anymore. It strikes me that there are not people who are saying, if I don't get what I want on this negotiation, I'm going to hold the bill hostage.
But the devil's in the details enough that we really don't know for sure what's going to happen until the lights go up on the board, yes or no?
Yes, but there will not be a consideration of the bill on the floor until they know they've got the 60 votes.
This revenue source that you mentioned with the IRS being given more money to increase tax enforcement and therefore increase tax revenues, how's that money going to be made up?
Well, I think that's a very good question. Where are they going to get the money? Will the Democrats seek in the broader appropriations process to increase funding for IRS, for example? There may be other ways to get it. Will they then try to put it in the second bill of the infrastructure process, which is the softer infrastructure money, which is going to be in the reconciliation bill?
Did the Republicans pull back on this first vote, not only because the bill wasn't really put together yet, at least not enough to be comfortable, but also because it looks like the Democrats will be able at this point to pass a infrastructure bill on a reconciliation basis in the House, and therefore they needed maybe to get on board the train before the train left?
Well, I think that's always been part of the problem. The other part of the problem is, to the degree that the Republicans block something which they think is broadly popular, and which many of these 10 Republicans want very badly for their states, will that add fuel to the fire of people who say we have to do something about the cloture rule and filibuster?
But you also have the situation where you've got the leader of the Republicans, the minority leader now, Mitch McConnell, saying he's spending 100% of his time to try to defeat the Biden agenda across the board. So they have to find a balance of where they're still within the Republican Party, yet not going over to the Democrats.
It's always a balancing act, and the real question is, does McConnell still have enough clout with the 10 Republicans who are part of this negotiating group to pull a couple of them back at the last minute? I don't think that's really feasible at this point.
The Democrats can stay united on this bipartisan bill. They're not going to make changes in it that they don't want to live with. We'll start hearing those things you're talking about of drawing lines in the sand. I'm not going to be for this.
We have not heard any lines in the sand, and there certainly have been opportunities for Senator Manchin to issue some of those declarations, but he has not. And in his visits at the White House, he has never said anything about. The strongest he said is on the second on the reconciliation part of it, that he wants to see the numbers and to make it a little less expensive.
The first infrastructure bill is aimed at more traditional things, roads, bridges, infrastructure, that sort of thing. The second bill is a little bit more into human infrastructure, not bricks and mortar. It spans Medicare, Medicaid, lots of other programs, might make permanent the child tax credit. It originally was going to be as much as $6 trillion in size. It now is about $3.5 billion. If it's passed, would it be the largest federal entitlement program ever, bill passed?
Well, I think that's true, but you realize that this is over a 10-year period. It's not a one-year sort of spending program. So you're making the child tax credit, you're making that semi-permanent, for example.
Some parts of the bill that maybe people thought might fall away or not come through at the end is when it included something on immigration, but in light particularly of the DACA ruling, the DACA program was basically frozen by a federal judge. A lot more pressure to put something into the bill. What's going to go into the bill to do that? And will both Republicans and Democrats, well, they don't need Republicans in the second bill, but do they have the Democrats on board?
I think it's a question as to whether they can find a way of putting it in the second bill, and that has to do with largely things like how do you fund it and other areas of government so that it comes under the purview of taxing and spending or is part of the reconciliation program that's put in by a change in authorization. But when I start talking about that, we get into the weeds very, very quickly.
Dr. Bruce Oppenheimer is our guest. He's a Vanderbilt Political Science Professor, emeritus. Nobody knows Congress better than he does. We're talking about what's going on up in Washington. Back to continue our conversation with the doctor after this message.